Video number 1. So begins this channel's journey in sharing this collection of stories and testimonies from across the internet, comprising over 4,000 such stories. They are meant to help and educate viewers on the sacred process of deathbed visions. Whether you are currently experiencing a loved one with visions or have a recently diagnosed loved one with a terminal condition, this information and the excellent hand-picked related videos showcased in this channel's playlist link are sure to be of comfort to you. Please visit them and share, subscribe and like my videos and theirs. Note: testimony or stories such as the following are the best at validating how real deathbed visions are, that they are facts, not dreams or hallucinations. How else could someone dying, and it is well known that deathbed visions only experience family or friends that have passed over and not those that are alive, see a deceased family member that they were not previously aware of until the DBV. Now, let's get to them. Number 1.1. My dad was with his mom when she died and she said, "Hi Ben." "Hi Henry," and then died. Ben was her husband who had passed years ago. But Henry was her eldest son who had passed fairly recently, and no one told her about it as they didn't want to stress her in her last months. But she saw him as she died. Number 1.2. My grandmother saw a neighbor of ours that she only saw once and didn't know died. She was telling my mom to let him in even though the door was like 3 feet off the ground. Weird. Number 1.3. Here's mine. My father was dying after a 6-month battle with pneumonia. He had only one lung from tuberculosis. Many men in my family have the same name. While he was dying, he saw many relatives who had passed before him. There's Gary. "Honey, our son, I was 9, is with his sisters," replied my mom. "No, not our son, my nephew." Gary was my cousin, a World War II and Korea naval veteran, and an alcoholic. My father gave cousin Gary his business card. When Gary would pass out, my dad would get a call, "Pick up Gary, or we call the cops." The fall of 1972 was damp, dark, and cold, and cousin Gary blamed himself for dad's walking pneumonia. When mom told cousin Gary that dad had taken a turn for the worse, he took it hard. Cousin Gary lived alone and drank everything in the house. Everything. Rubbing alcohol, furniture polish, Pine Sol, everything that had even a hint of alcohol. A couple days later, cousin Gary was found dead in his dining room. Dad was an attorney and was the executor of cousin Gary's will. When my mom asked dad's doctor if she should tell him his nephew had died, the doc said no, don't. Won't help the situation and would only agitate him. My dad saw relatives who had passed on welcoming him to the other side. He saw Gary with them, even though dad had never been informed that his nephew had died. Number 1.4. These are not imaginary or theories. My father never knew my niece committed suicide. We never told him, and when he was dying he said her name and he said she was hanging by a rope and she need help. Then he said, "You let her die." No one went to help her. She died 10 years before my dad. How did he know she died hanging herself all alone in basement? No one told him. He knew about my life and he also said for me to clean my car windows. I was in school from 7 to 2, then work 3 to 10, then finally to go see him every night. I had no time to clean car, take care of me, eat, anything. How did he know my car windows were dirty and that I was going to have an accident? I was overworked, going through everything. Even the judge just closed my case. He felt bad for me, but how TF my dad knew these things if they are all imaginary or lies? He even told me if I want him to come for me, all I have to do is just ask. Number 1.5. I know of an NDE where a young boy was very ill in the hospital. He flatlined and was revived. When his parents were allowed to see him, he told them when he died he saw his sister and she told him it was not his time to pass and that he needed to go back. His father got upset with this and told the doctor. He needed to sedate his son, that he obviously was hallucinating because the boy's sister was away at college and he could not have seen her. The doctor said not to worry about it and that they should go home and get some rest because they had been up all night. When the family got home, they received a phone call informing them of the terrible news that their daughter had been killed the night before in an accident and her college had been trying to get in touch with all night. Number 1.6, the best I have ever read, by the way. In the early 2000s, I was a new hospice nurse, having been on the job for less than 6 months. My first visit of the day was a female patient living in a nursing home. We'll call her Hazel. Hazel was in her 80s with a hospice diagnosis of end-stage Alzheimer's disease. I entered Hazel's room and received her sitting on the edge of her bed, awake and alert. I greeted Hazel and introduced myself. I assessed her to be oriented to herself only. In other words, she didn't know where she was, what the date or time was, etc. As I proceeded with my physical assessment, Hazel started to cry and became very agitated. This isn't unusual behavior for someone with Alzheimer's disease, so I didn't think much of it. Her speech was mostly garbled/nonsensical. But then after a couple of minutes, things changed. Hazel's crying turned to sobbing. I tried comforting her. Hazel, can you tell me what is upsetting you? Now, suddenly her speech became more coherent. She started stringing together meaningful thoughts. My sister died. Oh, my poor sister. She died. Keep in mind that Hazel continued to sob uncontrollably as she's saying this. It's not uncommon for people with Alzheimer's disease to remember events from their past, even childhood, as if it's happening now. I thought that this might be what was going on with Hazel. I tried unsuccessfully to redirect the conversation to a different topic. Hazel persisted. My sister died. She came and told me she died. I kept trying to console her as I completed my assessment. After leaving Hazel's room, I went to the nursing station to give report to Hazel's nurse and told her about the agitation and crying episode. Then I kind of matter-of-factly mentioned the story of Hazel saying that her sister had come to tell her that she had died. The nurse's jaw dropped. She pointed to the other side of the nursing station to a group of 4 to 5 family members and said, "Tell them what you just told me." It turns out that Hazel's family had just arrived to the facility while I was visiting Hazel. The family had been discussing/debating whether or not to tell Hazel that her sister had died the previous night. The family assured me that nobody had told Hazel about the death. Hazel's sister had died around midnight, and it was now 8:30 a.m. and nobody had said anything to Hazel.